Sophia Carter sat beside the hospital crib, gently stroking her 6-month-old son, Oliver. The rhythmic hum of medical equipment was the only sound in the sterile room, a constant reminder of her baby's fragile condition. Born with a rare neurological disorder, Oliver was paralyzed from the neck down. The doctors had told her that he might never move, never crawl, never walk. As she watched him sleep, tears welled in her eyes. She had fought for him with everything she had, consulting specialists, trying every possible therapy, but nothing changed. Every mother dreams of seeing her child take their first steps, but for Sophia, even the smallest twitch of Oliver's fingers would be a miracle. The weight of uncertainty and fear pressed down on her every day. Her husband, Mark, worked long hours to pay for the mounting medical bills, leaving her to navigate the pain and exhaustion alone. She clung to hope, but some nights, despair threatened to consume her. Sitting in that dimly lit hospital room, she whispered a silent prayer, longing for a sign that her little boy was still fighting. One evening, after another exhausting day at the hospital, Mark came home carrying a small golden retriever puppy in his arms. "His name is Max," he said softly, placing the squirming bundle of fur in Sophia's lap. She stared at the puppy, unsure how to feel. With all the time and energy she spent caring for Oliver, how could she possibly take care of a dog? There were medical bills to worry about, sleepless nights at the hospital, and the constant ache of uncertainty weighing on her heart. But as Max looked up at her with his warm, golden eyes, she felt something she hadn't in a long time: comfort. At first, she kept her distance, focusing all her energy on Oliver's needs. But Max didn't demand attention or act like a typical playful puppy. Instead, he seemed to sense the quiet sorrow in the house. Every day, he followed Sophia to Oliver's crib, sitting beside it for hours, his head resting on his paws as if keeping silent watch. At night, he curled up by the crib's side, his body pressed against the bars, offering warmth and companionship to the baby, who could not reach out for comfort himself. It was as if Max understood that Oliver needed him, even when the rest of the world saw nothing but a hopeless case. One night, as Sophia sat in the dim hospital room, she watched Max nuzzle Oliver's tiny hand. For a moment, she imagined what life might have been like if Oliver had been born healthy, if he could reach out and stroke the puppy's fur, giggle at his playful antics, or someday run through the backyard with him. A deep sadness filled her heart, but at the same time, a small spark of hope flickered. Max had brought something into their lives that had been missing for a long time, an unspoken bond of love and unwavering faith. As the days passed, Max became an inseparable part of their family. He was more than just a pet. He was a silent guardian, a source of strength, and a reminder that even in the darkest times, love had a way of finding its way in. And though Sophia still carried the weight of uncertainty, she no longer felt completely alone. Because now, Oliver had a friend, a special friend who would never leave his side. The night the miracle happened was one Sophia would never forget. A fierce storm raged outside, rain hammering against the windows as the wind howled through the trees. The occasional flash of lightning illuminated the darkened hospital room, followed by deep, rolling thunder that seemed to shake the very walls. Sophia had dozed off in the chair beside Oliver's crib, exhaustion finally pulling her under. Then, a deafening thunderclap jolted her awake. Her heart pounded as she instinctively turned toward Oliver's crib, fearing he might be startled by the noise. But what she saw made her breath catch in her throat. Max was standing on his hind legs, his front paws resting gently on Oliver's tiny chest. His golden fur was slightly ruffled, his ears perked, as if he had been trying to comfort the baby. Sophia barely had time to process the sight before something even more astonishing happened. Oliver stirred. For the first time in his short life, his tiny fingers twitched, ever so slightly, but unmistakably. Sophia gasped, her hands flying to her mouth as tears sprang to her eyes. Had she imagined it? Was it just a trick of the dim light? She held her breath, afraid to blink, afraid that the moment would slip away. But then, as Max let out a soft whine and nudged Oliver's cheek with his cold nose, something even more miraculous happened. Oliver's lips curled into a faint, sleepy smile. It was a simple gesture, one that most parents might take for granted, but for Sophia, it was everything. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt beside the crib, reaching out to gently touch Oliver's tiny hand. It had never moved before, not once, not even involuntarily. But now, with Max by his side, there was life, there was movement, there was hope. Shaking with emotion, Sophia whispered, "Max, what did you do?" The puppy simply wagged his tail, his warm eyes filled with an understanding that words could never capture. Something had changed that night. Whether it was a coincidence, a medical breakthrough, or something far beyond human understanding, Sophia knew one thing for certain: this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The next morning, Sophia wasted no time. With her heart still racing from the events of the night before, she bundled Oliver in a soft blanket and rushed him to the hospital, Max trotting faithfully beside her. The storm had passed, but inside her a new storm of emotions raged: hope, disbelief, fear. Had she truly witnessed what she thought she had? Or had exhaustion and desperation played tricks on her mind? When she arrived at the hospital, she nearly stumbled into the examination room, breathless as she recounted what had happened. The doctors listened with skeptical expressions, their medical training urging them to dismiss it as a reflex or mere coincidence. Paralyzed muscles don't just start working overnight, one of them muttered. But Sophia refused to back down. Just watch, she insisted, placing Oliver gently on the exam table, while Max sat obediently by his side. A nurse reached out to check Oliver's vitals, and as she did, Max suddenly licked Oliver's tiny fingers. A sharp gasp echoed through the room as Oliver's hand twitched again, clearer, stronger than the night before. The skeptical expressions on the doctors' faces melted into shock. One of them immediately ordered a series of tests, checking nerve responses and muscle activity. Minutes stretched into hours as they examined him, the professional detachment slipping away as astonishment took its place. Finally, one of the doctors, an older man with graying hair and years of experience, turned to Sophia with an expression she had never seen from him before: pure wonder. "His muscles are responding," he said, shaking his head as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. "It's faint, but it's there. This isn't supposed to happen." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she clutched Max, her voice barely a whisper. "It's because of him," she said, looking at the golden retriever beside her. Max woke something in Oliver. The room was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. Science had no explanation for what was happening, but Sophia didn't need one. For the first time since Oliver's diagnosis, hope was no longer just a fragile wish. It was real. From that day forward, Max became more than just a loyal companion. He became Oliver's greatest source of strength. Every morning, as Sophia gently placed Oliver in his crib, Max would be there, wagging his tail expectantly, ready to offer his silent encouragement. It started with small, almost imperceptible movements, tiny twitches of Oliver's fingers whenever Max licked his hand, slight flexes in his arms when Max rested his head beside him. The doctors continued their tests, unable to explain the gradual improvements, but Sophia knew deep in her heart that Max was the reason. As the months passed, the changes became undeniable. Oliver, once completely motionless, began to respond more to Max's playful nudges. His tiny fingers gripped the dog's fur. His legs twitched when Max pressed his warm nose against them. Sophia watched in awe, unable to hold back her tears every time she saw a new flicker of movement. It was slow, painstakingly slow, but it was progress, something she had been told would never happen. Max refused to leave Oliver's side. Whenever doctors ran tests or therapists worked on his limbs, Max sat nearby, his golden eyes filled with quiet determination. When Oliver grew frustrated, letting out small cries of exhaustion, Max would nuzzle him, gently licking away his tears as if urging him to keep trying. And Oliver did. With every small movement, he grew stronger. By Oliver's first birthday, he could move his arms, something that had once seemed impossible. By his second, he could sit up with support, giggling as Max danced around him, barking excitedly. Against every medical expectation, Oliver was defying the odds. Then came the moment that changed everything. On a crisp autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted through the air outside their home, Oliver stood, wobbly, unsteady, but standing. His tiny hands gripped the fur of his best friend, his legs trembling with the effort. Sophia held her breath, her hands pressed over her mouth as tears streamed down her face. Then, with a determined look in his bright eyes, Oliver took a step. One shaky step, then another. And in that miraculous moment, he didn't walk toward his mother. He didn't walk toward his toys. He walked toward Max. Sophia let out a sob of pure joy, watching as Oliver collapsed into Max's waiting embrace, giggling as the dog licked his face excitedly. He had done it. Against all odds, against every medical expectation, he had taken his first steps toward the friend who had never given up on him. The doctors called it a medical anomaly. Sophia called it a miracle. And Max? He simply wagged his tail, as if he had known all along that Oliver would one day walk. Because love, in its purest form, has the power to heal. Oliver's progress continued to astonish everyone around him. What had once seemed like an impossible dream, movement, independence, even walking, was now becoming a reality step by step. His journey was not easy. Every small victory came with struggle, pain, and moments of frustration. There were days when his limbs felt too weak, when his muscles refused to cooperate, and when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him. But through it all, Max was there, his unwavering presence a constant source of motivation and love. Physical therapy sessions became a routine part of Oliver's life, but no therapist was as patient as Max. When Oliver tried to lift his arms, Max would place his paw gently on his hand as if encouraging him to keep going. When he attempted to balance on his wobbly legs, Max would sit beside him, ready to catch him if he fell. And when the frustration grew too heavy, when Oliver's small hands clenched in defeat, Max would nuzzle him, his warm brown eyes silently telling him, "You can do this." By the time Oliver turned 3, he wasn't just taking steps, he was walking. His steps were still unsteady, his legs still trembled with effort, but he was moving forward. Sophia watched in awe as her little boy, once deemed unable to move, now ran through the backyard, his laughter echoing through the air. And always, just a step behind him, was Max, his best friend, his guardian, his miracle. Doctors and specialists continued to examine Oliver, struggling to explain the impossible. Neurological recovery at this level is unheard of, one had said, shaking his head in disbelief. We can't explain it. But Sophia didn't need an explanation. She knew that medicine had played its role, but love, companionship, and an unbreakable bond had done what science could not. Max had given Oliver something no treatment ever could, hope. And with that hope, Oliver had done the impossible. He had defied the odds. Years passed, but Sophia never forgot the night everything changed, the storm, the flicker of movement, the moment hope had returned. Now, as she stood on the porch, watching Oliver run through the backyard with Max chasing playfully behind him, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Against all odds, her son had not only learned to move but to thrive. His laughter rang through the crisp afternoon air, full of life, full of joy. Max had grown older, his once vibrant golden fur now streaked with gray, but his devotion to Oliver never wavered. He still followed him everywhere, his tail wagging with quiet pride as he watched the boy he had helped heal. Their bond had never been just that of a boy and his dog. It was something deeper, something unbreakable. Sophia knew that science alone could not explain what had happened. Doctors had called it an anomaly, an unexplainable recovery, but she knew the truth. Oliver had been saved by love, the pure, unwavering love of a loyal friend who had never given up on him. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Oliver sat beside Max, his small hands gently stroking the dog's fur. "You saved me, didn't you, Max?" he whispered, his voice filled with childlike wonder. Max let out a soft sigh and rested his head on Oliver's lap, as if to say, "I would do it all over again." And in that moment, Sophia understood the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, the most extraordinary healers come in the smallest, furriest packages. Love, in its purest form, has the power to work miracles, to defy logic, to heal wounds no medicine can touch. Max had been more than just a dog. He had been a guardian, a friend, a miracle. And because of him, Oliver had a future filled with possibilities. One step, one moment, one act of love at a time. At its heart, Oliver's journey was more than just a medical miracle. It was a testament to the incredible power of love, hope, and unwavering companionship. In a world that often relies on science and logic, sometimes the greatest healers come in the most unexpected forms. Max was not a doctor, nor a therapist, yet he accomplished what no treatment could. His presence alone sparked something deep within Oliver, proving that love and support can ignite change where reason says none is possible. This story reminds us that miracles do not always come in grand, dramatic moments. Sometimes, they appear in the gentle nudge of a loyal friend, the quiet persistence of unconditional love, and the belief that even in the darkest times, hope is never truly lost. It teaches us that when we face impossible challenges, it is not only medicine that heals, but the kindness, patience, and love of those who stand by our side. Whether human or animal, those who refuse to give up on us can help us defy the odds, just as Max did for Oliver. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all, love has the power to transform lives. It can break barriers, restore hope, and create miracles where none were thought possible. Sometimes all it takes is one faithful companion to remind us that anything is possible, one paw, one step, one heartbeat at a time.